WarsawJS.
Okay, so we ended up at single-page applications walking into server-side rendering. Now, dear everybody, when moving from single-page applications into server-side rendering, what would be the reason to go back to the server? That would be kind of connected with the problems that SPAs introduced.
We can prepare initial content for search engine crawlers.
Not necessarily initial content, but we can provide information for search crawlers at all.
Yes, of course.
Right? At all. Okay, what else?
Improvements of metrics. So the first, so the time to first paint, for example.
Exactly, because there are no round trips. So there is no situation where we start with empty blank page that we then have to download the scripts, then execute them, parse them, and then execute them because they are different steps. Then finally, shoot the request for the JSON data, probably JSON, etc. We just do it in one shot, and we get the initial thing. So what else? What are the cons of that?
Probably more cost on the server, because now we have to render more on the server.
We get back to the cost of the server. Like now we would have to pay for some kind of cloud services, right? Because we're not going to host it on our own. Exactly. So, dear everybody, what is going on? First, when we shoot a request, we've got a non-interactive page. By a non-interactive page, that means basically we return from the server a either pre-rendered or rendered in the runtime a page that is basically, I would call it a dead HTML, that is basically non-interactive, that if we click something, if we try to type something, change something within the page, we cannot do it in the very beginning because JavaScript might have not been loaded yet, and even if it was not loaded, it might have not been executed yet. And the thing is, dear everybody, once we, let's say from React, from Next.js, or from Angular SSR, when we send the HTTP from the server to the client, we have to additionally load JavaScript, the framework runtime, and the application, which would basically kind of wake up within the browser and then take the control over the HTML that is there. This process is called hydration. So basically, we do have the content there, but it's non-interactive, and we have to wait for it to become interactive. Now, this process takes time. And the thing is, what metrics do we improve when we move from the SPA into SSR? Could you throw? Largest contentful paint, exactly, because of no round trips, or at least as long as we do the server more or less correctly, then yeah, LCP is going to be way better, but what is going to suffer? FID, which is first input delay, basically interaction is going to be delayed. Why? Because we're going to see the content pretty soon, but we need to wait for the JavaScript to be loaded, to be executed, and finally to have something done. Right? So, by the way, we've got SSR, which is basically rendering on the server, and from now on, when the client takes over the HTML, the application content, then we will be, when any interaction takes place, the rendering would be done on the client. So kind of, we do increase the cost of the infrastructure, but on the other hand, only for the initial page. So it's not the same as it used to be with MPA. So we are still using, like, consuming client resources. So we're trying to kind of take the best of both worlds and some kind of, walk around a golden middle in some way, right? So the thing is, does your company have to kind of, for instance, if you're running MPA, the question is, like Amazon, like, do you care about SEO very much? Or maybe you are running a very specialized application for a limited amount of users. So depending on whatever your use case, business use case is, a completely different architecture might suit you. Now, in server-side rendering, we could basically certainly like load one page, but there is nothing wrong if we wanted to move to another page. Like we can have multiple so-called landing pages or basically multiple entry pages. And again, we decide what do we want to render on the server and what do we want to render on the client. So again, here we've got hydration whenever we basically send a new page that is basically filled with HTML, and when we want to make it interactive. Now, something that is a limitation of SSR, like what we typically call SSR, is that we're going to build the page content on request time. And that is, dear everybody, not to pre-build it, not to make it before. Now, we could improve that. We don't have to do it on request time. We could do that up front, right? And the thing is, dear everybody, maybe I'll just skip those things a little bit. Yep. We can improve that, dear everybody, if we can build pages before there is a request, so that when there is a request, we basically send the page that is done. When can we do it? Dear everybody, we can do it for static content, for static site. Basically, it's called static site generation, SSG. And the question is, what is a static site? If I'm serving the same content for literally everybody, then like it doesn't matter whom I'm going to send something, I can pre-build it earlier. But if I'm going to send a different content for you and for you and for you and for you, because you're logged in and I know what are your preferences, it's going to be slightly more difficult for me to pre-render the content, especially that if you, let's say, change your preferences, or let's say I know you're interested in sports, but at the same time, many sport events or basically things happen, so that even though I know what are your preferences, I'm not sure if I would like to pre-render pages for millions of users, and the content changes. Like, you know, as we go, as basically the time passes. So the thing is, if something is specific for the user, or if something changes frequently, it might happen that generating content upfront might not make much sense. There is one more problem, dear everybody. Imagine a situation in which you have, like, this is theory, and what is practice? Imagine you have a very big page where you have lots of static content, and only some of the pieces of it depend on the recommendation on a certain user who might be logged in, but the user might also be tracked by cookies. Now, what do you use, SSG or SSR? If you do SSG, then you cannot know what the user is, right? Because you don't know who the person is. And if you use SSR, you're going to wait longer because the page is big. And the question is, could we do a mix between the two? And the question is, do frameworks support it? So that's one problem. Now, going back to the slides for everybody. If we take a look, what is hydration? Generally, when we run our template rendering on the server and we send it to the client, all the pieces of our page are actually non-interactive. So we have, I would call it, dead HTML that basically when we touch it, it doesn't do anything. And hydration is basically the process where DOM is actually being covered again with, for instance, in React, with virtual DOM. So we try to build it once again. And the funny thing is that during the initial build, when React gets receives the control over the page, is trying to build the very same DOM. So you could say, like, why would it do it? Like, there should be no difference. The same DOM should be created. By the way, if you have a situation where the server returns some HTML, some DOM, some HTML, and what client-side React tries to build is slightly different, there is a slight difference, you're going to get an error, right? and that is a very nasty error, believe me. And why is React doing the thing? Right? Why is React doing the thing? Because when we start JavaScript, we're starting with a cold cache. We don't have anything, right? And when we have virtual DOM, we always compare the two trees of virtual DOM. So in order for next renders, next state updates, etc., to actually reconcile, which is basically rendering what changed between the trees, we have to have the initial tree to compare it to the new tree after the change, right? So we have to build it, and this takes time. So in React version 18, you know there is something that is called render root, basically the API in React 18, but there is also a function that is called hydrate root. So basically, not building it from scratch, but taking it over, getting it under control. So you can easily think that the more we have to hydrate, the more we will have to wait for JavaScript to be available, right? And the whole point behind partial hydration is that maybe we don't have to hydrate the whole thing, right? Now, if we think about it, isn't going back to the server actually a step backwards? Like we were at the server, then we moved to SPA, now we're going back to the server again. Do you consider it a step backward or not? Like, this is what people criticize. People take a look at server components and they say, hey, you're doing the same thing as we do in PHP since 1995. Can you pass the mic? Where?
From my point of view, it's not fully. It's more looks like a mix. When we tried to get some stuff that was good from multi-page application, yeah, and tried to build it in our single page because we have some issues, yeah, and we try something like to find something between.
Okay, but let's try to make it more precise, because I didn't hear any kind of facts here. What is the difference if I were serving a page in PHP or serving a page in React Server in Next.js? Like, I'm going to access the database, I'm going to render the templates, right? I'm going to manage, I don't know, session or something like this. So I'm pretty much doing the same things, right? So how could that affect largest contentful paint or, first contentful paint, etc.? This is going to be pretty similar, right? Because like we are doing the same things.
But we are using at least the same language. Yeah.
Sorry?
In that case, we are using the same language in front end and back end. We
yes,
do not.
But when does it start to matter? It starts to matter not when we initially load the page, but when we already have the page at the client and it's already hydrated and we start to interact with it. Then, you're right, this is the point where it actually starts to matter. Because if we have something written in PHP, Python, Ruby, whatever you put here, and you need to manage your state somewhere here, for instance, in server session, whatever that is, and then you would like to have some interaction in, let's say, React, Angular, whatever that is, you need to manage state in two completely different technologies that cannot talk to each other. And that's the point. But it doesn't matter on the initial load, right? It doesn't matter for the initial metrics, but it does matter what happens after the initial load, right? So in some way, it is going step backwards when it comes only to the initial load, but only after it, there is a difference. Yeah, could you pass the mic?
Yeah, the main difference that in Next.js we have only server-side rendering for the first page, and then it works as a client-side rendering. So we have to spend money only for the first render. And it's a big difference with the previous multi-page rendering when we render all pages on the server side.
Yeah, but basically that goes down to what we've said, that we have the same stack, so we don't have to, redo a request to the server. We have single stack, single model in TypeScript, type safety done the same way, etc., etc. So yeah, all those things. Now, could you tell me, since we see that walking into the direction of server-side rendering actually tries to fix SEO, tries to fix history, tries to actually improve largest contentful paint that has been kind of like it was evident it was broken, right? And we're not trying to reintroduce the entire costs of the infrastructure. Shouldn't we say that SPA was a mistake? I guess most of you do work in SPAs because this is basically the trend since many years. So I'm kind of not criticizing you or blaming your companies, whatever, but isn't that kind of a conclusion? We have two guys speaking, yeah?
I think no, because, for example, SEO, it's not the problem for some applications. Yeah, when we have a lot of interactions in application, SEO, it's not a problem at all.
For
we
some
don't.
applications.
For some applications. So
Basically.
for some application, it's
We can
definitely
always
not
answer
mistake.
it depends, but the question is what does it depend on? And it depends on the requirements. But was SPA a mistake? For some companies, I would say definitely yes. If you care about the speed of serving your content, if you at least try to render the things on the client initially, you're going to basically destroy the performance of your application. And by the way, big e-commerce global companies tried to move to SPA and they had to move back because that was a complete disaster, that was a mistake. For some companies, yes, it was a mistake. For some, certainly not. But for some, yes, definitely. By the way, we are in a point where, like globally, we know that too many pages are actually SPAs. Especially when you have a, I don't know, somebody wants to run a blog, right? And they take, you know, they take Webpack, they take Tailwind, they take React and something and something and something to write, you know, 3 blog posts. And that's basically it. It should be just a static page, right? Often that should be just a static page, right? So I would say it is a mistake pretty often. Everywhere we have trade-offs. So the question is, what are our architecture drivers? So basically, if I make a decision, what is the most important thing for me? For one company, that would be basically the serving content speed, because I make money on ads. So I want as many people visit my page, and people will visit my page the faster my content is being delivered, right? So if my page becomes slower, I will basically lose money. Other products will be basically specialized for very narrowed group of people, and they don't care whether something, for instance, in you know, offices, in public sector, etc. Such an employee is going to open our page at 9 a.m. and they're going to work within the application for the remaining 8 hours. So whether this loads in 1 second or within 1 minute, that doesn't make a big difference. They have to work in it anyway, right? Other companies would have a problem that too many employees are basically going away and they have to hire new people who have to learn the thing. So the architecture driver would be, how fast can I basically adapt an application? Companies and products are completely different. So one of the most important things when we make decisions is actually to get to know what are the business requirements, what are the architecture drivers. So what is the thing that makes my decisions actually important or right? All right, so going back to static site generation. If we know that a content is not dependent on everybody, the user, or it doesn't change very frequently, we can basically pre-render it, and this is what we call everybody static site generation. We can also do something that is called incremental static generation, so that when our content does update within time, we're just going to replace what resides on the server. Now, details come into place and play an important role. Like, am I going to replace the content every hour, every, I don't know, 5 minutes? And how much of that content do I have? For instance, if I publish lots of news, I might have, let's say, I don't know, 300 news every day. But the problem is, in the database, I might be having like 10 millions of the articles, right? And if I want to suggest what is the new, let's say, recommended article, the problem is I would have to reproduce the 10 millions of articles. So, you know, theoretically it's nice, but in practice, things get complicated, right? But anyway, this is something that we've got at our hand, and we can use it. Now, SSG and ISR in Next. In Next.js, basically, we can customize it in many ways. I'm going to send the slides, so if you want to like make pictures, I'm going to publish it anyway. We can decide that it would be configured per page, so some pages would be SSR'd, some pages would be SSG'd. We've got a variety of different possibilities, so upon request, or revalidate a page each n seconds, or let's say revalidate on demand, so that we shoot an HTTP over a certain resource, and when this HTTP is shot, we basically revalidate this single resource, or upon request when it's empty. And last but not least, we're doing the stale while revalidate, SWR, which basically means I have some potentially outdated content. When somebody asks me for the content, I will send it. If it's old, sorry, I'm giving you the old content, but if you're lucky and it has been updated, then I basically give you the updated content, right? So I always have some content with static site generation. Now, let's dive deeper into the process of hydration, dear everybody. So, partial hydration basically relies on the fact that we are going to choose which parts of the application will actually be interactive. If you take a look at the pages that you visit every day, you will see that the places where you actually click are only some of the places. Like most content is static. You're just going to take a look at it, read it, see it, but you're not going to interact with it. So the question is, should we, do we have to hydrate the whole page? Certainly not. So the thing is, how could we provide a way to hydrate only part of the page and part not? And that is basically partial hydration, which in React is basically called React Server components. That's basically the name. It's been called island architecture before. So we've got islands, different separate pieces of the page that are actually kind of anonymous, right? So, and if we consider that an island, so basically a piece of the UI, which could be, for instance, micro frontend, why not? We're going to decide that this will be interactive and another one will not be interactive. By the way, something could be hydrated eagerly when the page starts because, let's say, this is a login form, right? So this is the thing that the user will likely click first, right? And some things are probably less important or, let's say, less frequently used so that we can hydrate it asynchronously, for instance, when somebody clicks, right? So we might not even need to hydrate something up front. And as you can see, there is a big variety of different approaches. Again, in React version 18, we've got hydrate root. If you like experimenting, you can basically create your small quasi partial hydration framework using this single function that you can take from React DOM package. Now, island architecture has been implemented in a couple of frameworks already, and that is Marco, Astro, Eleventy, Quick, which I unfortunately don't have time to speak about, and finally RSC. There is a linked article from The Guardian where they created a higher order component, as you can see the island thing, and that's basically what the island is doing is basically reading what the content of the component is, and it's asynchronously running the hydrate route. So basically this is what the tools are relying on. Now, if we speak more about the tech details that we've got in Next.js, when we use get server-side props, we basically get SSR. When we use get static props or get static paths, we move to SSG, and finally the new thing that we've got is either the use client or use server directive. It's been changed. It's been changed across the versions. Like it used to be use client, then it moves to use server. But again, when we use either of the directives that we've got, we move to partial hydration. Now, the client is something that will be interactive, and the server is something that I'm slightly going to cross the time.
You have already. 1 minute, 1 minute. 30 seconds, actually.
I know. I'm going to do this slightly further. Sorry.
We do have a schedule. We do have a next speaker. And also, we need time for you to ask questions to the audience that they will get to answer and then possibly win a JetBrains license. So this is one of the most detailed and interesting, fascinating talks that I have witnessed in quite a while. And still, you have 1 minute. Go.
That would be pretty challenging to do. All right, so I'll just continue. Use client is basically when we want interactivity. Use server, dear everybody, is when we say that we're just going to render it on the server and we're not going to hydrate it. So we're not only going to do less things in JavaScript, but we're also sending less JavaScript within the bundle. So we get like the benefits on multiple levels. So not only not hydrating it in the runtime, but also not bundling the code for it. Now, client components get hydrated, they're interactive. Server components are not hydrated, not interactive.
You thought I was kidding.
What I would recommend you to do is there are two very important RFCs, so requests for comments, where there is lots of discussion like what should be done, how that should be done, and that is basically how server components have been designed. And there is a first-class support for promises. So basically, have you ever wondered why there is no async await in React components? Like we have a function component. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. Yeah, because we do have a schedule, and because this is so fascinating. First of all, how many agree that this is one of a very detailed and interesting talk? Let me hear you. Luckily, Mr. Ducin, we have you here live, and so you will have a chance to also interact later on in the networking with Mr. Ducin if there is more information which absolutely must be presented. At this moment, we'd like to invite you and actually implore you, beg you, to perform the contest, to actually ask questions to the audience and give 3 people a chance to give the best answer to the question. Is that okay? Can we do that?
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much.
So the question is, what do you know about the current state of partial hydration and this whole approach that we've been talking about in Angular?
Where's the microphone? Where's the microphone?
Because you know what is going on in React.
Where's the mic? Who has it? Who wants to ask the question? Who's first? Oh, answer the question.
So there will be 3 answers, so mine will be the worst. And basically, I think Angular is pretty late to the party. Like I haven't heard of any, standard implementation of partial hydration, but I might be wrong.
What was the question?
Okay.
Can you repeat the question again?
That was an answer. What is the current status of what is implemented in all this area in Angular? That's the question.
2 more chances? You may have the best answer, Kacper.
I think so, yeah.
The answer is bigger than it's not.
First of all, I love the fact that we have trees and hydration and all this stuff. It's sounding like life.
Ecological.
Yeah. No other people who will answer that question? Another question?
Well, we can just accept this answer because it's the only answer.
Kacper, congratulations. You have won another 100% discount for 1-year JetBrains license. And with that, sir, we would really like to invite you all to interact and have a conversation because we are here live. The whole thing about a community is that we have more opportunity to really meet in person and exchange information. It's nice to be in a classroom, formal environment, and it's also nice to be in the presence of people who can share information with you directly. I was saying backstage that this presentation is so good, I would like to see it in 3 parts because, yeah, this is really something. I think you're extremely talented. I even started to understand what you were talking about. So, are you sure you don't have another answer out there somewhere? Anyone do you remember the questions? No one even remembers the question. What was your first question, sir? About hydration? Hydration.
For the contest, that was about Angular.
About Angular. Uh-huh.
Kind of muted, probably.
Uh-huh.
No, I'm not muted, but
Oh.
that was about. Yeah, the question was about Angular. By the way, do you want to know? So, Angular has been supporting hydration entirely, like for the whole page, but it did so-called destructive hydration. So basically, when initial HTML was rendered and Angular was taking over what was in the front end, it destroyed the whole thing and recreated from scratch. So there was a blink that basically the page was empty. Kind of stupid, right? So what they introduced in Angular, I believe version 16, was non-destructive hydration, so just doing the thing right. And what they're working on in version 17 that should arrive kind of within 1 month is either now partial hydration or the next major version. So that's it.
Thank you once again. Thank you, thank you. No.